They say you never forget the moment your world shatters. For me, it was the sound of my son's voice, flat, distracted, and almost annoyed, when I told him that his father had just died. "It's Megan's birthday, Mom. Can we talk tomorrow?" That was the moment I realized I hadn't just lost a husband. I had lost my son too. And yet, that was only the beginning. What followed wasn't just grief, it was silence, betrayal, and a series of discoveries that revealed the family I thought I had was built on lies I was never meant to see. This story is about more than death. It's about the cost of silence, about what happens when loyalty turns into entitlement, and about the strength it takes to protect the truth when even your own blood turns against you. Gerald, my husband of 42 years, died at our kitchen table halfway through a joke. One second he was teasing me about powdered creamer, the next his spoon slipped, his hand twitched, and his eyes went wide like he had forgotten how to breathe. I screamed his name. I begged him to hold on. But by the time the paramedics arrived, his body was already cold. I was still shaking when I picked up the phone to call our son, Nathan. My only child. My hope for comfort. My tether to the family Gerald and I had built. But instead of comfort, I got excuses. Instead of grief, I got brunch plans. And instead of support, I got silence. Nathan didn't come to the funeral. Not even to stand by his father's casket. Not even to look me in the eye. And while the whispers of friends and family filled the church pews, "Where's Nathan? Did he miss his flight? Is Megan okay?" I stood alone, clutching the podium, staring at the empty seat where my son should have been. But grief has a way of peeling back the layers of what's hidden. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting at Gerald's desk, sifting through papers I was never meant to touch. And what I found in a locked drawer made my hands go cold: months of quiet bank transfers to Nathan, thousands upon thousands of dollars sent without a word to me. And tucked between the statements, a letter Gerald had written but never sent. A warning to our son. A plea for honesty. A promise to cut him off if he lied again. It was dated just 2 weeks before Gerald died. From that moment on, I knew my battle wasn't only against grief. It was against betrayal, against my own son, his wife Megan, and the silence they wielded like a weapon. This is the story of how I fought back. Not with shouting, not with revenge, but with something stronger: truth. And how, in the end, I chose to leave my legacy not to the son who abandoned us, but to the granddaughter who found her voice in the middle of lies. Because family doesn't end with blood. Sometimes, it begins with the people who choose you when others don't. Gerald's death didn't feel real at first. One moment, he was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, tapping his spoon against the side of his mug, grinning as he teased. "If this powdered nonsense ever kills me, you'll finally know real guilt." I laughed, rolled my eyes, sliced the butter for our toast. But before I could respond, his hand jerked. The spoon slipped. His eyes locked on mine with a look that I will never forget, like he was trying to tell me something without words. And then he was gone. I screamed his name, shook his shoulders, begged him to wake up. The phone was slippery in my hand as I dialed 911, the operator's calm voice guiding me through chest compressions while I whispered his name again and again. But even before the paramedics arrived, I knew. I knew from the way his head slumped, from how cold his fingers already felt in mine. By the time they covered him, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a museum of a life I wasn't ready to leave behind. My first instinct was to call Nathan. My only son. My hope for comfort. My tether to family. The phone rang 5 times before he answered. I was shaking, my voice breaking as I said, "Nathan, it's Dad. He just collapsed. He's gone." There was a pause. Then, flatly, "Oh, Mom, today's Megan's birthday. Can I call you later?" At first, I thought I misheard him. That grief was playing tricks on my ears. But then he added, distracted, "She's got this whole brunch planned, and we've got people over." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just lowered the phone and hung up, because I knew if I heard another word, it would break me in a way I couldn't survive. The silence that followed was unbearable. I sat in Gerald's chair, the one where he did his crossword puzzles, the one where he'd just been smiling at me minutes before, and I held his hand long after it had gone cold. The coroner asked if I wanted a moment. But the moment I needed had already passed. That night, I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, Gerald's phone on the nightstand beside me. Out of habit, I checked it. And there it was, a missed call to Nathan. The night before. 10:42 p.m. No voicemail. No answer. Gerald had tried to reach our son just hours before he died. And Nathan hadn't picked up. I clutched the phone to my chest, tears soaking the pillow, the weight of it pressing down like a final truth. My husband was gone, and my son was already gone, too, just in a different way. The day of the funeral, the whispers began even before the service started. Where's Nathan? Did he miss his flight? Is Megan okay? No, he hadn't missed his flight. He had chosen not to come. He had chosen brunch, laughter, and mimosas over standing by his father's casket. I stood at the podium, hands gripping the wood so hard my knuckles turned white, while strangers and old friends came to pay respects. And through it all, there was an empty seat in the front row. The one my son should have filled. Later, I saw Megan's Instagram post, her in a bright pink dress, holding a mimosa, captioned, "Best birthday ever. Love my hubby." She posted it at the exact hour I was delivering my husband's eulogy. That night, the silence in the house grew unbearable. I poured myself a glass of wine and stared at Gerald's empty chair. But the grief that had consumed me all day began to shift into something colder. A question. Because if Nathan could skip his father's funeral for a birthday brunch, what else had I been blind to? And when Gerald's old friend Brian mentioned financial stress, something Gerald had never told me, I realized the truth: grief wasn't the only thing I had to face. There were secrets buried in my own home, and the man I loved had carried them alone. I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was about to start searching. Grief is heavy, but suspicion is heavier. It clings to your bones and whispers at you when the house grows quiet. After the funeral, I tried to go on with daily routines, washing dishes, folding laundry, keeping busy so I wouldn't fall apart. But every time I passed Gerald's desk, I felt a pull. Like there was something waiting for me inside those drawers. Something I was meant to see. On the 5th night after he died, I couldn't resist any longer. The filing cabinet was locked, but Gerald had always told me where the spare key was. Taped to the back of our wedding photo in the closet. A symbol of trust. Or maybe a test. With trembling hands, I peeled the key loose, slid it into the lock, and opened the drawer. Inside were neat stacks of folders, tax returns, insurance records, retirement plans. Gerald was meticulous. Organized. A man who never left things unfinished. But near the back was a slim blue folder with a label that made my stomach drop. Nathan Transfers. I sat down at the desk, heart pounding in my chest, and opened it. The numbers blurred before my eyes, thousands upon thousands of dollars wired to Nathan. $2,000 here. $3,500 there. And one transfer that made my hands go cold, $12,000 labeled Urgent Megan Medical. There were 15 transfers in just the past year and a half. I had no idea. Gerald never told me. We had always promised no secrets. And yet here was proof that for months, maybe years, he'd been shielding me from something. At the bottom of the folder, tucked between two statements, was a folded piece of yellow legal pad paper. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a letter. Not to me. To Nathan. This is the second time you've told your mother one thing and done another. I've kept quiet because I wanted to believe you were being honest. But if you lie about Megan's expenses again, or if I find out you've used this money for anything else, I'll have no choice but to cut you off completely. I love you, but I won't let you take advantage of your mother's trust. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. I knew Gerald's handwriting better than my own. The letter was dated just 2 weeks before he died. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the page, the edges crumpling in my trembling hands. My mind kept flashing back to Nathan's voice on the phone when I told him his father had died. Calm. Dismissive. Inconvenienced. And now I knew why. He hadn't just abandoned us out of selfishness. He had been living off Gerald's quiet generosity, building a house of lies on our backs. My husband had spent the last months of his life caught between love and disappointment, trying to protect me from the truth while begging our son to be honest. And Nathan had chosen lies. I put the folder back, locked the drawer, and returned the key to its hiding spot behind our wedding photo. Not out of respect, but because I needed time. Time to decide what this meant. Time to figure out what I was going to do. The next morning, I poured coffee into Gerald's favorite mug, the one still sitting by the sink from the day he died, and sat at the kitchen table staring into the dark liquid. My grief hadn't lessened, but something had shifted. This wasn't just mourning anymore. This was betrayal. And betrayal, I decided, demanded truth. So when Nathan finally showed up 5 days after the funeral, fidgeting at the edge of the couch, Megan waiting in the car with the engine running, I was ready. I asked him, quietly, "Did you know your father tried to call you the night before he died?" I watched his face twitch, just slightly, before he shrugged. My phone was on silent. We were out to dinner. Megan planned this surprise thing. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm. Then I said, "I found the transfers." His whole body stiffened. "What transfers?" he said too quickly. Too loudly. "The ones from Dad's account to yours. The ones labeled for Megan. The ones for vacations. The ones for rent shortfalls. Don't lie to me, Nathan. Not now." He tried to defend himself. "They were loans, Mom. We were going through a rough patch. Dad offered." That's when I handed him the folded yellow letter. The one Gerald had written but never sent. He read it. His jaw tightened. And then, folding it back up, he muttered, "He didn't mean that." In that moment, I realized something I had been trying not to admit. I wasn't talking to my son anymore. Not the boy who used to fall asleep on Gerald's chest during Sunday football. Not the teenager who built Lego cities on our living room floor. But a man who had chosen, over and over again, to put his comfort above his family. And as I looked at him sitting there, refusing to take responsibility, refusing even to mourn his father properly, I felt something sharp and cold settle inside me. If Gerald hadn't been able to finish what he started, then I would. The truth wasn't just mine to carry anymore. It was mine to protect. The morning after Nathan's visit, I woke with a strange kind of calm. Not the peace that comes with acceptance, but the clarity that comes after a decision is made. For days, I had let grief toss me back and forth like a storm wave. But now, staring at Gerald's chair, empty and untouched, I knew something had shifted. I couldn't bring Gerald back. I couldn't make Nathan care. But I could protect what was left. So before the coffee finished brewing, I picked up the phone and dialed Alan Clean, our longtime attorney. Alan had known us for decades. He handled Gerald's business filings, sent us birthday cards, even attended our anniversary party years ago. "Alan," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me, "I need to revise my will." Immediately. He didn't ask questions. Just scheduled me for the next day. That evening, I gathered everything. The bank statements. The folder of Nathan's transfers. Gerald's unsent letter. And the audio file I had secretly recorded during Nathan's visit, his half-confessions and excuses captured word for word. Finally, I wrote a 6-page letter to Ava, my granddaughter, sealed in an envelope marked to be opened on your 18th birthday. Because whatever happened between me and my son, that little girl deserved the truth. When I walked into Alan's office the next morning, he took one look at my face and didn't bother with pleasantries. "I assume this is about more than estate planning," he said. I handed him the folder, my hands steady now. "Everything goes into a trust. Every account. Every asset. The house. Gerald's stocks. The annuity. But not for Nathan. Not for Megan. Not a cent." Alan didn't flinch. He simply opened a fresh legal pad and started writing. We structured it carefully. Ava would inherit everything, but not until she turned 25. Before that, funds could only be used for education or housing. No quick cash-outs. No luxury cars. No manipulation. And then I added a clause: if Nathan or Megan ever attempted to challenge the will, Ava would gain immediate control of the trust and they would lose everything, including visitation rights during the trust's active years. It sounded harsh. But harshness wasn't the point. Clarity was. Boundaries were. Because when a son chooses brunch over a funeral, and a daughter-in-law chooses manipulation over mourning, you stop worrying about diplomacy. Alan leaned back, reviewing the draft, and finally said, "This is solid. No loopholes. No weak points. But it's going to hit him hard." I didn't hesitate. "That's the point, Alan. It's supposed to." Within an hour, the documents were notarized and filed. I walked out of that office not feeling victorious, but steady. Like I had drawn a line Gerald never could. That night, with a glass of wine in hand, I reread the letter I had written to Ava. 6 pages of truth, not bitterness. I told her who her grandfather really was. What he had sacrificed. How he had tried, even in his last days, to reach her father. And how Nathan had failed him. I told her the inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a responsibility. A reminder to choose loyalty over convenience, courage over compliance, and love over appearances. When I sealed the envelope, I didn't feel like I was disinheriting my son. I felt like I was protecting my granddaughter. Protecting the only piece of Gerald still left in this world. For days later, Nathan received the letter from Alan's office. I know the exact time it landed in his mailbox, 11:13 a.m., confirmed by delivery receipt. And though I wasn't there, I could picture it clearly, Nathan shuffling through envelopes, casual, distracted. Until he saw the law firm's logo. Until his stomach dropped. Until the weight of everything he'd ignored landed all at once. He didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. But Megan did. Her texts came fast and sharp, passive-aggressive at first, then openly hostile. "Wow. Classy, Cora. You're unbelievable. Do you even care about Ava?" I didn't respond. Because silence, I realized, was sometimes the most honest answer you could give. When Nathan finally called 3 days later, his number blocked, his voice soft like a child caught in a lie, I let him speak first. "Mom," he said quietly, "I just got the letter." And I said nothing. Letting the silence stretch. "Is this real?" he asked finally. "You tell me," I replied. Because the truth was no longer mine to explain. It was his to face. They didn't wait long before showing up in person. It was a Sunday afternoon when I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. No phone call. No warning. Just the sound of a car door slamming shut. When I opened the front door, Megan was already marching toward the porch, heels clicking too loud for the quiet street. Nathan trailed behind her, hands shoved deep in his pockets, head down like a boy dragged to the principal's office. The second Megan reached the steps, she started, not with a greeting, not with a question, but an accusation. "You're manipulating this family through legal threats," she snapped, her voice sharp and rehearsed. I stood in the doorway, not moving, not inviting them in. Just letting her words hang in the air. Then she added, you're punishing us for setting boundaries." That word, boundaries, nearly made me laugh. Gerald's funeral wasn't a boundary. His father's final call wasn't a boundary. 15 quiet transfers weren't boundaries. They were betrayals. But I didn't laugh. I didn't even answer. I simply stepped aside enough for them to come in, not for their sake, but for Ava's. Because I knew she was upstairs, listening. And she needed to hear this. Megan strutted into the living room, perfume heavy, eyes blazing. Nathan sank onto the couch, silent. Always silent. "We talked to a lawyer," she said, arms crossed. "And if this will isn't revised, we may have grounds to question your capacity." Her meaning was clear. They'd try to paint me as unstable. Unfit. Confused by grief. I leaned forward just slightly. "Are you threatening to declare me mentally unfit?" Megan shrugged, casual, smug. "I'm just saying, it's not unheard of. Grief does strange things." From the corner of my eye, I saw Nathan flinch. Guilt, maybe. Or shame. But he said nothing. And then I heard it, the faint creak of the hallway floor upstairs. Ava, shifting her weight. Listening. That was when I turned directly to Nathan. "Do you agree with her?" I asked. He swallowed, his throat bobbing, but he didn't answer. Just looked away. That silence was louder than any words Megan had thrown at me. Megan, emboldened, took a step closer. "You're tearing this family apart over money." And that was when I let out a single, bitter laugh. The kind that escapes when the absurdity finally tips into tragedy. "I'm tearing it apart?" I said quietly. Gerald died alone. His own son didn't show up to the funeral. And I'm the one tearing this family apart? The room fell silent. Heavy. And in that silence, Ava appeared, halfway down the stairs. She didn't say a word. Just stood there, eyes wide but steady, watching all of us. Megan turned, startled. "She doesn't understand." But I cut her off. "She understands more than you think." Ava's eyes moved from her father, sitting small and quiet on the couch, to me. Then back again. And then, slowly, without a sound, she turned and walked back upstairs. That silence, that simple act of walking away, was louder than any accusation, any defense, any threat. Megan saw it too. I watched her expression falter for the first time, the smugness slipping, replaced by something sharper. Fear. She opened her mouth, but I was already moving toward the door. "We're done here," I said flatly, holding it open. Nathan stood without protest. Megan hesitated for one last second, heels rooted to the floor like she might lunge for another round. But then she followed him out, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke after a fire. I shut the door before her last step hit the porch. For the first time since Gerald's death, the house felt still. Not healed. Not whole. But still. 3 weeks later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. My name written in Ava's careful 12-year-old handwriting. Inside was a small black flash drive. No note. No label. Just evidence. Recordings of phone calls. Screenshots of texts. Videos filmed from behind her bedroom door, shaky but clear. I sat in Gerald's chair, headphones in, listening to the world my granddaughter had been forced to witness. Megan's voice sharp, "She's manipulating everyone with that will. If Ava sides with her, we'll pull her out of school until she gets her head straight." Nathan's voice softer, "Worse, just let Mom run her game. If Ava plays nice, she can still help us later." And Megan again, whispering in the kitchen, "If we push just a little harder, she'll crack. We'll say she's confused. Get the lawyer to question her. Then boom, the trust gets flagged." I paused the recording. My hands shook. And then I found a final text file. Just one line, written by Ava. Grandma, I believe you. I'm saving this in case you ever need help. That was when I realized I wasn't just protecting Ava. Ava was protecting me. In this family, she was the first one brave enough to use her voice. And that flash drive, the truth she had captured, would change everything. The mediation was held in a beige office downtown, neutral carpet, polite furniture, bottled water on a glass table. A place designed to make confrontation feel civil, even when everyone inside knew it was war. Alan sat beside me, his briefcase neatly stacked with the documents we had prepared, Gerald's unsent letter, the bank transfers, Nathan's recorded visit, and at the very top, the flash drive Ava had entrusted me with. A simple word printed on the label, evidence. When Nathan and Megan walked in, the contrast between them was stark. Megan looked like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama, sharp suit, sharp heels, sharp eyes. Nathan looked older than his years, shoulders slumped, eyes refusing to meet mine. The mediator began with the usual warm introduction, her voice steady, professional. We're here to resolve concerns regarding the estate. Let's start with your perspective, Mrs. Whitfield. But Megan didn't wait. She leaned forward, cutting in with her script. Cora has made decisions clouded by grief, she said smoothly. Her judgment is unstable. We're deeply concerned about her capacity to make rational legal choices. It was the performance of a lifetime. Pity laced with accusation. Concern masking greed. She even laid a gentle hand on Nathan's knee, as though she were the one holding this family together. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice or appeal to sympathy. I simply slid the folder across the table. This is why, I said. The mediator began leafing through it, wire transfers, handwritten notes, the yellow letter Gerald had written but never sent. Then the list of audio files. Finally, the flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop, clicked play, and the room shifted. Megan's voice filled the silence. If Ava sides with her, we'll pull her out of that school until she gets her head on straight. Then Nathan's, just let Mom run her game. If Ava plays nice, she can still help us later. And then Megan again, low and calculating, if we push just a little harder, she'll crack. We'll say she's confused. Get the lawyer to question her. Then boom, the trust gets flagged. When the recording ended, the mediator looked up slowly. Mrs. Whitfield, she asked Megan, were you aware that your daughter has been documenting attempts to alter the trust through manipulation? The color drained from Megan's face. She stammered. She's 12. She doesn't understand context. But it was too late. The words were out. The recordings existed. And the facade crumbled fast. The mediator turned to Nathan. Would you like to respond? He rubbed his hands together, eyes on the floor, but said nothing. His silence spoke louder than any denial could. I leaned forward slightly. She tried to warn you, I said softly. Your daughter. That was when Megan exploded. Her mask ripped away, fury pouring out unchecked. This is all because you couldn't handle your husband dying, she shouted, slamming her hand against the table. Now you're trying to punish us because you're lonely. The mediator raised a hand calmly. Mrs. Whitfield, please step outside and collect yourself. Megan stormed out, her heels echoing down the hall, leaving Nathan behind. For a long moment, he didn't move. Didn't look at me. Finally, in a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he whispered, I didn't know it had gotten that bad. I met his eyes for the first time in months. You didn't want to know. He nodded, slow, defeated. I just wanted peace. I shook my head. You don't get peace from silence. You get it from standing up when it matters. When the mediator returned, her tone was final. There is no basis to challenge the trust. It is legally sound and morally justified. Ava's documentation strengthens its validity. This matter is closed. Megan never came back into the room. Nathan left quietly, still staring at the floor. No handshake. No apology. No look back. I stayed behind for a moment, gathering my papers. What I felt wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. It was something heavier. A kind of settled sorrow. The kind you feel when a war ends not because you won, but because the truth finally stripped away all illusions. The silence I carried home that day wasn't empty. It was final. Ava turned 18 last Friday. There were no balloons. No cake. No loud celebration. Just a quiet knock on my front door around noon. When I opened it, she stood there, taller now, her eyes steady in a way that reminded me of Gerald when he made decisions no one else understood until years later. In her hand was a sealed envelope, my envelope. The one I had written her 5 years earlier. I wanted to read it with you, she said softly. We sat together in Gerald's old chair, side by side, as she carefully opened the flap and unfolded the 6 pages I had poured my soul into. I watched her face shift as she read, focus, grief, tears, and finally something stronger. Understanding. She paused only once, lifting her eyes to mine. Is all of this still true? Every word, I answered. And she hugged me tighter than she ever had before, whispering, "Thank you for telling me the truth when no one else would." After a long silence, she pulled out her phone. There's something I want to show you. On the screen was a short video, Ava standing in front of a judge, her voice clear, unwavering. I'd like to change my middle name to Coraline, after my grandmother. The sound of it, Ava Coraline Whitfield, split me open. Tears came fast, not from pain, but from something deeper. Pride. Gratitude. The certainty that my husband's legacy and my own were safe in her hands. Later that afternoon, we went to her graduation ceremony. The gymnasium smelled of flowers and folding chairs, the air buzzing with families calling out names and snapping photos. When Ava's turn came, the announcer's voice rang out, "Ava Coraline Whitfield." She looked right at me as she crossed the stage, diploma in hand, and smiled. In that moment, I saw not just my granddaughter but the proof that truth had survived. That loyalty, courage, and clarity could still live in this family. Nathan was there, too, sitting alone in the back row. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes red, his clapping quiet and obligatory. He didn't approach me. He didn't approach Ava. Not because he wasn't allowed, but because he finally understood what it meant to be cut off in ways deeper than money. After the ceremony, Ava ran to me first. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "I want to live with you next semester." My roommate backed out. I laughed through tears, knowing I'd get another year of her music drifting from the bedroom, her toothbrush in my bathroom, her stories filling the silence. Another year of choosing each other. That evening, as I tucked her into her childhood room, just for old time's sake, I left the door cracked open, the way I used to when she was little. She looked at me, eyes glistening but strong. "You gave me a life I didn't even know I needed," she said. I kissed her forehead. "You chose it, sweetheart. I just cleared the path." As I walked down the hallway, I passed Gerald's photo on the wall. I touched the frame lightly. "She's going to be okay, love," I whispered. "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. This wasn't just a story about inheritance, betrayal, or even grief. It was about truth, the kind that can destroy when hidden but heal when spoken. It was about how silence, when left unchallenged, becomes its own form of betrayal. And it was about one granddaughter's courage to break that silence when the adults around her failed. Backhand index pointing right. What would you do if you were in this situation? Backhand index pointing right. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something similar? Share your story below. Backhand index pointing right and tell us, what story should we explore next? Because sometimes the hardest truths aren't the ones we tell others. They're the ones we finally admit to ourselves.